I got the worst news ever. I got your bike impounded last night.
Conscious.
Yo, what is going on, Dank fam? It's your boy Mike Diesel with another story time on the ZX10. Yeah, we had to test the crash cage out and see how well she does in public environment, but let's make this thing a little better looking. Alright, that's much better. So we're on the 21 KRT ZX10 today, and I want to tell you guys about a story time that happened to myself, but also a story time from what happened yesterday at the lot, and it has to do with borrowing bikes from friends or just borrowing bikes from strangers, and then the unfortunate incident if you do get into an accident on that bike, how it's handled as far as repaying the person that you borrowed the bike from, and some more details on top of that. But myself personally, I've ran into one of the worst situations ever where I borrowed a bike from somebody and actually never got the bike back to them. And I've never told this story to you guys before, but since then, that was years ago, and I'm happy to say that I was able to replace that bike. So I'm going to go into detail with that, guys, but I also have some really sick news. I learned one of the sickest tricks I've ever done in my life, and I really want to show you guys this video to get the video started. This is a jump to high chair on old Betty White. Betty White 0304 stump bike. She's still putting in work, people. I'm so hyped. But anyways, we got the 360 cam. It's probably going to be a crappy angle, but we tried. I'm going to get some barbecue, talk about this story. I'm so hyped to be riding this bike. I've been riding around in the beater van that I just bought recently. If you guys know anything about Ford E250s, I just bought a 04 E250 for 1,400 bucks, and you guys can imagine it's very clapped out, but it gets from A to B, and your boy doesn't have any payments, so I'm really hyped. The jump to high chair, people, is one of those tricks that I was always super scared to try. I'm 6'2", so I'm really lanky, so every single jump through the bars I landed, but I kept failing to keep the bike up until I finally nailed it. So my story time today is about a time back when I flew from Florida to Las Vegas, and then I drove from Las Vegas to California for a ride that was called LA to SD ride. So if you guys aren't familiar with that ride, it was a motovlogger based ride a couple of years back, or a lot of years back, where a bunch of motovloggers from the West Coast had a ride from Los Angeles and they rode down to San Diego. So the cool thing about it was, it wasn't like a stunt ride, it was just a bunch of nerdy motovloggers getting together, having a good time. There wasn't like any stunts or anything like that going on. So myself, I didn't even plan on making the ride, but a friend was like, hey, why don't you fly out here and I'll help you out as far as accommodating you driving to California. All you have to do is find a bike to ride. So I was like, sweet, easy enough. So I went ahead and posted online, seeing if anybody had a bike for me to borrow, and this kid off Instagram indeed did have a bike for me to ride, and none other than a ZX10. But his name is Flash. Flash was probably one of the nicest guys in the community I've ever met. He's a stunt rider. He had an F4i, and they also had that red ZX10. This bike was pretty unique. It had a dented tank. It had like a junction valve for the handbrake. I think it had a cut windscreen, a couple other odds and ends. So it was like a partially stunted out 1000cc bike. And I was super excited because I had never rode a 1000cc stunt bike, even though it was partially set up. I was really hyped to have all that power and also crash protection and whatnot to do some wheelies on it. So myself, being a stunt rider at the motovlogger meet, I met up with all the guys at the LA location, and we ended up riding from LA to SD, San Diego, and I was the only one doing wheelies. I think we even stopped at the border of Mexico. It was just a really sick time. And once we got up to the meetup spot, which was at a dealership, there was cops everywhere, people. I'm talking like 20,000 bike cops, a bunch of cop cars, and then worst of the worst, a bunch of flatbeds just like this sitting around the dealership. So you already know what time it is. They're snatching bikes up and taking them to impound. So I was pretty worried. Let me shift out of first. This thing's like so I was really worried since the bike that I was borrowing had insurance, but it didn't have registration. I know what you guys are thinking, why did you borrow that bike? I was just pinched on time and resources, so I just had to snag that bike, and I just stuck Dizzled it. He had a license plate on the bike, but since the registration wasn't up to date, there was like a piece of paper over top of the license plate that you get from like a dealership, and it had the dealership branding on it or whatever. So that key ingredient right there made me look very, very bad to be riding around the city with. But nonetheless, I did the ride and we ended up at the dealership and had a great time at the motovlogger meet. So flash forward to the end of the event, a bunch of bikes, probably about 20-30 bikes, are getting ready to head out from the event spot to the after party, which is at a Dave & Buster's. So I went ahead and tried to gather all my stuff in time to get in the pack with that 20-30 bikes. I didn't happen to get all my stuff in time, so I looked around and I found like a pack of like 4 or 5 bikes to go ahead and ride to Dave & Buster's with. We left the dealership and we started riding through the city a little bit, and then the highway entrance is right there. So as soon as we're taking the corner to get on the highway, I see that pack of 20 or 30 bikes I was originally going to ride with pulled over with one cop in the front and one cop in the back, both bike cops. And these 2 cops basically herded all 20 or 30 bikes off to the side of the highway. So as I'm passing the pack of 20 30 bikes that are all pulled over, I'm super thankful I didn't have a chance to ride with them, thinking that I was in the clear since those cops were preoccupied with taking care of those bikes. I was wrong. So I started riding down the highway a little bit. I really didn't even get like 1 or 2 minutes down the road, and all of a sudden I got a hand grabbing my front. Oh, I just kill switched myself. Not even a few minutes down the road, I'm just cruising, looking straight down the highway, trying not to look back. And I look over and it's one of the most intimidating looking bike cops I've ever seen in my life. And he's automatically like telling me to get over, pull over. And I'm like, dude, really? So I pull over and it was just all downhill from here. The cop's like, so is this your bike? And I'm like, no, it's not my bike. And he's like, whose bike is it? And I'm like, this kid Flash. And he's like, Flash, what's his name? And I'm like, I don't know, he just told me his name was Flash. And he's like, okay, well, what are all these stickers on your bike? Are you part of Dankwheelie? And I'm like, part of Dankwheelie? What do you mean? And he's like, we got a bunch of riding groups and stuff like that. I just want to know if you're part of Dankwheelie. And I'm like, dude, I have no clue. I'm just a fan of them. And he's like, yeah, you got a keychain that says Dankwheelie as well. I'm like, I don't know, man. This isn't my bike in the first place. I'm literally just renting it. So whatever stickers he has on it, that's his. Yes, sir. I ain't no jigsaw bro with the drop backs, but we're keeping her steady. Big props to that guy. He's a foot brake beast. Alright, anyways. So it's looking very bad right now. Cops just like, whose bike is this? I don't know. It's a stunt bike. So the weirdest part about all this was this guy shows up in a polo with a Canon camera, like he's a photographer, and he doesn't say a word to me while the cops are standing there. He just starts taking pictures of me, taking pictures of my gear, taking pictures of the bike, all angles. Basically, that guy with the camera is getting a profile of my bike and my gear and everything else. In case there's any crimes in the future or anything like that, they can trace it back to me with all the matching stuff in those photos. So that was really weird. Then he started asking me about like gang affiliations and everything else. I'm like, look, dude, I'm from Florida. I just borrowed this bike spur of the moment from another rider, and he was cool with it. It would have been a lot easier to tell him that I was famous on YouTube, and that's why the guy trusted me to borrow his bike. But it was just a really hard sell that I'm just a random nobody that just happened to grab this kid's bike and ride it to California. So the cop basically said, you got insurance, but you don't have registration. That's the reason I pulled you over, is because your plate was unexposed. I'm like, so what do I got to do now? And he's like, basically we're going to impound the bike. And I'm like, no way. So he's like, yeah. So they ended up impounding the bike, and the person that I went up to California with showed up to the highway, picked me up in the car, and then I drove to Dave & Buster's and had the most miserable night ever, thinking about like, what am I gonna do? This kid's bike just got impounded. I didn't even have the money to go on this trip. Someone else helped me out with this trip years ago when I didn't have money like that. And now I gotta pay to get this kid's bike out of impound. Instead of calling the kid that day and telling him what happened, I waited until the morning time, get my thoughts together, and I just called him up like a man and said, yo dude, I got the worst news ever. I got your bike impounded last night. And he's like, oh, what happened? I'm like, man, they had like a sting operation. All these cops were just targeting us on this ride, and they were relentless, man. Like 20 something bikes at least got impounded that day. and I was one of them. But there was no way around it. The cop just was going to keep chasing me, and I just figured the best thing to do was to pull over and see what happened. The reason why the cops were targeting us that weekend is because the weekend before there was a stunt ride in California where there was a bunch of bike cops trying to stop the riders as they were doing the ride, and they were taking a turn, and one of the bike cops happened to get clipped by another rider as they were taking the turn, and the bike cop fell. And at that point, I feel like the next weekend cops were out for blood trying to get even with other riders. But the key point about this thing was that we weren't stunt riders, we were just motovloggers having a goofy time riding around chilling. So if you guys are familiar with impounds, basically you pay a nice chunk of money to get your bike out, and then every single day that it sits in there afterwards, it accumulates more and more fees for each single day. So I called Flash and I said, hey man, I know you're in nursing school and stuff like that, but do you have funds to get this bike out and then I can pay you back for it? And he said, no man, I don't have any money. And he's like, you? And I'm like, no, I don't have any money to get it out either. I was like, please don't leave that bike in impound. Whatever you have to do to borrow money to get it out, I will pay you back. I promise you I'll pay you back. Just please keep me posted and don't leave that bike in impound, or it's just gonna get worse and worse as far as fees and buying it back goes. And he's like, all right man, I'm gonna try my best. About a week goes by, I give him a call back and I say, hey man, any luck with working on getting this bike out of impound? And he's like, nah man, money's tight right now. And I just called him the other day and they said like the fees are like over $1,000 and something. He's like, there's just no chance of getting it back at this point. I'm like, no way man. Like I was just crushed, because at that point man, I had kind of accepted the fact that this kid wasn't getting his bike back, and it was my fault at the end of the day for borrowing the bike, even though he didn't give me a bike that was registered or anything else. I was the one that took the responsibility to borrow that bike, and I failed to get it back to him in one piece, and it absolutely crushed me. The worst part about this whole story is that it took me a couple years to make amends with this guy, but I took a month-long trip. I went to Texas, Arizona, Vegas, and my last stop was in California, where I was finally able to link up with Flash about a year and a half ago. And one of the best days of my life, one of the biggest weights off my shoulder, was meeting that kid and handing him a stack of cash and telling him, do whatever you want with it, bro. I'm just so happy to finally give this to you. It was a personal thing of mine. I didn't want to make a scene about it. I didn't post it online and on Instagram and stuff like that. It just filled myself up to finally give this man back the money that I lost him when I got that bike impounded. So that was what happened with me. I lost Flash's bike, and then I paid him back for that bike. But yesterday, a somewhat similar incident happened, and I kind of just want to get your guys' opinion on how it all went down and what you would do in this situation. I don't want to use my friends' names. It just happened, so it's kind of a touchy subject. I'm just going to keep everybody's names discreet. I need to find this barbecue spot. I feel like I passed it a year ago. Yes, I did. I haven't showed you guys launch control yet. Here we go. So the 360 cam mount does not like 150. We learned this. Alright, so what happened yesterday, try to make this story as quick as possible. I was at the lot riding, you know, learning jump to high chairs, doing my damn thing. And there was two riders. One kid, John, had a blue 0304 Ninja ZX6R, and this thing is absolutely clean. It has blue OEM fairings. Like when you see a 0304 that's decked out, it looks like it's factory, but it has all the stump parts. This is his bike. So John has his 0304, and then this kid, Derek, has an FZ07, and he just got the FZ07 a couple days ago, and he just came off a Grom. So he's got that big bike energy. Now he's a couple days in on a 600 or 700, whatever you want to call it. So Derek says to John, hey, can I borrow your 0304 and ride it up and down the lot? And John's like, yeah, sure. So Derek goes ahead and hops on John's 0304 and starts doing some wheelies on it. And at one point he tries to do a new trick that he's never done before on John's bike, and just absolutely eats it. So basically what he did, he was trying to jump from like seat stander to spreader, and he missed the gas tank, and then his feet came down into the seat, and he's basically just like doing this with no hands on the brakes. So as the bike's about to flip, he grabs a handful of clutch and rear brake and just slams the bike down, and then he flies over the front, basically like mouse trapping slash looping. It was just a really rough crash. At this point, I see everybody surrounded by the bike. I run up to him and I was like, oh, what's going on? And you see Derek, who's not the owner of the 0304, covered in road rash, while the 0304 is just completely mashed up. It had OEM blue fairings. The whole front fairing stay was just broken off, and then you had like these two side fairings hanging on. The clip-ons look like this, but they're supposed to look like this because all the mounts and everything were bent. It was a nice brand of clip-ons too. And then another smack to the balls is your fairing stay, which is a couple $100. It's completely mangled and bent, and it was blue powdered to the bike. So this bike had at least $1,000 worth of damage, I'd say, in that one little crash. And I was just feeling super bad for John, just staring at this bike. So first things first, John said to Derek, hey, are you okay? And Derek's like, yeah, I'm good. And they ended up pushing the bike back to the spot. And some time went by, and I heard some drama kind of spewing up, and I was like, what's going on? So basically what was going on was Derek had his FZ07 that he just got a couple days ago, and he had this fresh title in hand, and John said, hey man, I need money for these damages to this bike, or I need the title to your bike. And Derek was like, I don't have any money. So John's like, well, I'm gonna need that bike then. I wonder how a rolling burnout looks. When I heard that, I was like, oh man, things got escalated pretty quickly. So at this point, you can probably tell that Derek's pretty bummed, since he just got this bike a couple days ago, and here he is handing the title over to John, and John just as bummed. He had this bike, not to mention for sale at the moment, get destroyed, and now he can't sell the bike, and now he can't get the money to replace the parts. It's gonna come out of his own pocket. So I'd be pretty upset if I was John too. So John ends up taking his bike and just rides the FZ up and down the lot all day. And there started to be some disagreement as far as John taking the bike. And I mean, this is where I wanted your guys' opinion. If someone crashed your bike and had a couple $1,000s in damage, and they had no money to replace it, but they had a bike that was possibly worth more than what the damages were, do you find it right for him to take the whole bike with him? Because it's a really tough subject for you to borrow someone's bike and not have the funds to replace it. So after some debate going back and forth a little bit, they ended up coming to an agreement that he wasn't going to take Derek's bike from him. He was just going to take the title and the key to the bike. That way Derek couldn't ride the bike and has more motivation to pay him back for the damages quicker. So I feel like that's a relatively fair agreement. I know personally, if I had someone crash my bike and they had a perfectly working bike of their own, if you take the resources for them to ride that bike, then they're most likely going to want to pay you back quicker. That way they can get everything they need to ride their bike again. But basically it's just a sense of collateral, I guess. I feel like it was fair, but it just makes me want to bring up this point about borrowing people's bikes. Usually it's kind of spur of the moment. You don't really think about all the risks involved, but you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you bite off more than you can chew if something bad was to happen. And the thing that I told Derek, who just got his FZ, you know, things are doing well for him right now. He made a come up on that bike. I said, look man, one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is when everything is going well, you need to look out for things that might go wrong. And there's a better way to word that quote. It basically means when you have all these highs in life happening, you know, you get a new car, a new girlfriend, new job, some money in your pocket, whatever the case may be, you're just getting more and more gassed up, and everything around you may seem just a lot more positive and uplifting. And you never know, something bad can happen and you could completely overlook that being on this high of life that you have with everything going right. So basically, you just need to keep in mind things that can go wrong, but have a positive outlook while you do it. Just be realistic about situations that you get yourself in, even if you won the lottery the day before. That's one of the best pieces of advice I can give you guys, taken from this video. But let me ask you guys, if you were in this situation, would you have gotten on someone's bike to ride it if you didn't have any money in your pocket to replace potential parts you might break? Or if you were the owner of the bike that got damaged, how would you handle that situation? Would you just charge it to the game and not take any money from him? Would you take his whole bike? Would you take his key and the title? Or like, how would you handle it? It's such a tough subject, and it sucks because I was walking up to them to talk to him just to get more info after things had kind of cooled down, and then more people walked up to him and started getting a little escalated. So I was in a weird situation. I'm friends with everybody there. I just simply walked away from it. But the guy that owns the bike that got damaged, John, he made a great point. He said there's like 5-10 people here talking about this, and it's only between me and the kid that wrecked my bike, so I don't really know why everybody's here. And that's an excellent point. I understand if you're friends with one person or you're friends with the other and you want to defend each other, sometimes it's just one of those situations where you can't get involved and you just gotta let it take its course. But I do want to say, I hope everything works out. I hope that beautiful blue 0304 636 gets back into tip-top shape, and hopefully Derek can recover financially without too much of an issue, getting John's bike fixed and getting his bike title and key back. It's just a situation all around. I hate to see my boys down like that, but it's just one of the prices you pay with stunt riding people. And another price that I paid is having a bent middle finger that I've been going to doctors for the past couple months to try to get fixed. But I had 2 x-rays, no broken bones. I just had an MRI appointment today. Shout out to Dr. Selman. He gave me some good news, but he didn't give me good enough news to say that there's a surgery that can fix his finger. So basically my finger has no tendon or ligament damage. Everything's intact. The only issue is tons of swelling around the knuckle and everything else, but also swelling in the bone. So I'm hoping with some time and care, the swelling can kind of go down. So if you guys are religious, or maybe you're not, send your boy a prayer, some good vibes, that we can get this middle finger healed up properly. As you can see, I'm still riding pretty hard, doing jump to high chairs and learning a lot of new tricks, but I just want to have my body 100%. And the one thing that I hate doing is riding or beating on a body part that I know isn't fully healed and making it worse. Oh, 3 more miles into stunt ride content's coming up. We got Grom Day this weekend. Who's going out to Grom Day? Your boy, I don't know how, managed to snag a very cheap Grom, and it's very clapped out. It's got like 7,000 miles on it, but I have wheels for Grom Day this weekend. I'm just working on a plan to get up there comfortably, since my new van is a little questionable. Let me know if you guys want to see the new candy van. I'm in love with it. It leaks out of the roof, so when I'm driving, it drops raindrops on my fingers while I'm holding the steering wheel. Let's get it, boy. I'm hungry. All right, guys, I want to keep this video short, but let me know your opinion on this whole situation. I personally take borrowing bikes with a grain of salt. Definitely recommend having some money in your pocket if you're going to borrow a bike, and be in good terms with the person that you're borrowing the bike from. Don't just have them throw you the keys and basically say good luck. Just let them know, like, hey, if something was to happen with this bike, how are we going to handle this? You know, I know you don't want to think about that when you're test riding a bike. You know, if you're thinking about dropping your bike enough times, you might just drop it, but you have to keep some stuff in mind and be realistic about situations that you put yourself in. That's gonna wrap it up, guys. Let me know what you guys think of the new jump to high chair. Let me know if you guys are going to Grom Day. I cannot wait to see everybody. It's been a minute since I've been out and about, but we got the energy rolling, people. Huge shout out to Impact Tech for the crash cage race rail setup. I think they're sending me some more goodies for the ZX10, so stay tuned. And if this video gets to, let's say, 7,000 likes, I'll take the exhaust off and we'll ride this straight piped so we can really let her scream. But other than that, people, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Like always, keep it dank. Peace.